Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Football Diary podcast. It has been, and this is no understatement, an epic weekend at the top of the Premier League table. I've got Dave with me today to discuss all of the moves and shakes in this weekend's action, including Manchester City's shock loss to Bournemouth, Arsenal losing to Newcastle in a really difficult game for them, Liverpool going top after beating Brighton, and Nottingham Forest going into third in the Premier League table. Yes, you heard that right. It's been a really up and down weekend for a lot of teams, but I think we have to start really, Dave, with Manchester City's defeat to Bournemouth, don't we? It was a great performance for Bournemouth, first of all. I think a deserved win for them too. First time they've ever beaten Manchester City as well. But I just think we need to take a moment to reflect on how good this Bournemouth team is becoming, because they didn't fluke this win against Man City, did they? The stats will tell you that the possession was all in City's favour, as it's going to be. But they didn't really look under threat very often, did they? In fact, they were threatening City for the majority of the game.
Yeah, I think they probably can count themselves a little bit unlucky not to be further ahead at times. And it wasn't really until the very end of the game when City really started to put them under that kind of pressure. But I think you've got to give Bournemouth a lot of credit. I think they targeted that City build-up at the back. You saw how well and effective they have been in their press at times this season. I think they chose their moments really well to put that City defence under a lot of pressure and cause them so many problems. And they were really unfortunate not to probably get a couple of the goals. And I think you look at the likes of Semenyo, who's been a revelation this season. He caused them so many issues with that press. And we were talking about it was only going to take time for this Bournemouth attack to really start scoring goals and sort of gelling, because the likes of Evan Nilsson, relatively new, coming into the team, but he's scored a couple of really important goals in this last couple of weeks and starting to look the part. I think you've got to give them massive credit. I kind of earmarked this game actually as a little bit of a potential banana skin for City, and I think if you look at their defeat earlier in the week against Spurs, but the amount of injuries that they've had. Having said that, the team that they put out, very, very good team, and Bournemouth, I think they've done tremendously well to get the win.
I don't think we can take away from the fact that Bournemouth has spent a decent amount of money, to be fair, since Iraola's been in charge. And I think the thing I'm really impressed with their recruitment is it's players that weren't really on many clubs' radars at the time. And although the fees that they've paid for someone like Evan Nilsson and for Kirkez as well have been decent by Bournemouth standards, you've got to see this as the way that Brighton have been recruiting in recent years, where these players' values is going to increase with a few good performances and a season of good performances in the Premier League. I don't think you can doubt now that under the coaching of Iraola that most of this Bournemouth team have improved in value under him. I think Semenyo is one of those ones who you look at and you think, well, what price would you pay for him now if you were to take him away? And I think there's been rumours that Liverpool have been looking at him. Semenyo's been fantastic, and I don't understand how other clubs weren't interested in him at the start when Bournemouth came in for him. But I think he's in the right place right now for his development, isn't he? Because he's getting so much opportunity to do what he does best under Iraola. And so are many of these players, aren't they? It feels like a team of players that are kind of handpicked for his system. You don't see that at many clubs.
I think he's in the perfect club to nurture his talent. I think I saw a really fascinating piece actually in the BBC about, and he speaks about the opportunities that he had and the amount of rejected trials that he had at a young age. I think around 15, 16. I think he had trials at Spurs, Arsenal, Crystal Palace, and was rejected from numerous clubs, and about having this positive mindset of turning the corner and keeping obviously focused on your goals. And you got to give him a lot of credit, I think, especially the way he's performing at the minute, and to be obviously those eyebrows to being raised and attracting the likes of Liverpool, etc. He's in a great place, and I think a great club. Like, you look at what Bournemouth have been doing. You mentioned there some of the talents that they've got, and they've got options in that squad now as well. I think there was a time when it looked like quite a thin squad. But they've got plenty of options. I think that some of the replacements that they've got in there, the likes of Evan Nilsson in for Solanke, they've identified some of these profiles perfectly. Like, he's a perfect replacement for Solanke, a different kind of player, but he complements their style of play really well.
He does. Well, for them to be going in for a Porto striker in the first place shows how far they've come, because Evan Nielsen's seen this as a step up in his career going to Bournemouth, which is great. And it's a club that's not really going to make a huge amount of revenue, is it, from attendances, for example, from match day revenue, because of the size of their ground. So I do feel like they're going to have to sort of sell a couple of these players at some point in the next few years, which is sad to say. But for the time being, their recruitment has been spot on. But I think also you've kind of got to see Iraola as a coach now who's going to be quite sought after, because he's got that knack that clubs are looking for of making fairly ordinary players look extraordinary in the right system. And so many clubs could do with that right now. I think we're hoping that Manchester United will be one of them, aren't we, after their latest managerial recruit. Obviously, Aston Villa did it with Emery as well. But yeah, Iraola, he's a great coach, isn't he, fundamentally? And he saw this club as an opportunity to put that to the test, but also identify players that are kind of going to complement his system too. And so far, he feels like he's got everything he needs to succeed. So Iraola, can Bournemouth hang on to him? He's a fantastic coach so far, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's only young as well. I think he's getting the amount of young coaches we're going to have in this league now is crazy. But yeah, I think it is. I think he's in the right place. I think it's a perfect club for him to make his mark. And I put them in a similar sort of boat to Forest. Really, I think they're a similar kind of. I think Forest have probably got a slightly stronger squad, probably stronger first 11. But I think in the type of football that they play, both kind of counter-attacking teams, I think they'll be looking at potentially making that next step, because they've been in the Premier League for quite a while now. They'll be looking to make that step, a la Brighton and West Ham the last couple of years, looking to make it into Europe, because they've got the coach to get them playing as well as they are, and the system, it suits them down to a T. And I think they've got a really talented bunch of players in there to make that step potentially. It's just looking for that consistency, but making it like the performances like this one against City is going to help them.
Yeah, great. I mean, great talent ID their scouting department has, haven't they? And it's working a treat so far. And you can't really kind of underplay really how important this victory is. Their first win over City ever. I mean, a City team, like you say, that look like they're on the ropes a little bit, especially after their defeat in the cup recently as well. It felt like it was the best time to play them in some ways. And it's the end of their 32-game unbeaten run in the league as well. So, yeah, it's been a landmark victory, I think, for Bournemouth, but also a landmark moment in the title race too. I mean, you struggle to find weaknesses in City's game normally. At the minute, they look a little bit human, dare I say, don't they?
Yeah, I don't think you can make too much out of it. I think there's going to be blips throughout the season. We've seen them have it over the last couple of years, where they'll probably not win for a couple of games, but then go on another ridiculous run. Obviously, I've got a few issues there with injuries, but there's so many talented players in there who can just step up and make a difference. And I think the way that they play their game doesn't actually... they're probably not as threatened by certain opposition in certain games, because they dominate so many of the games. They keep possession of the ball. They're so careful of, when they've got possession of the ball, and they're able to hurt the opposition at any given time. So I don't think it's probably going to be a problem for them. I mean, you look at them at the minute, Liverpool right up there and probably looking as strong as anybody in the league at the moment. But I think it only takes a couple of Haaland goals to get them back on the right track again, doesn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, true. I mean, let's not forget it's their first defeat of the season. So yeah, you can't really exaggerate too much. But it's going to be made a lot easier by the result that we saw from Arsenal, who failed to capitalise on them losing ground, Man City, by losing to Newcastle themselves. And they've done this a few times so far this season, haven't they? And a lot of people made them, in their minds, favourites to kind of end this drought of titles. And we were amongst them, weren't we? We thought, this could be Arsenal's season. But they found it so tough in some certain games, haven't they? And this was one of those games where they really didn't have an answer to the way Newcastle set up. And I don't think 1-0 was a result that they could really moan at, really. Newcastle deserved the win.
I think the worrying thing for me, and I've mentioned it last few weeks, is that they didn't look like scoring, Arsenal.
No.
And that is the scary thing, is if Saka's not on the game, then it seems like there are others that don't that struggle to obviously stand up and make a difference, and that's what I've been saying now. I think Martinelli's, for me, is not quite at it. He's probably not been at it for the last 18 months or so. You've got obviously Raheem Sterling is not the player he was, 2 or 3 years ago now. And then you've got Leandro Trossard, who he's a very good player, but he's not going to score you the goals that you need to be scored, I think, to keep them up there. And it's a struggle at the minute for them, let's be honest. And I think that would be the worry in this game, is that they really struggle to create opportunities. Newcastle, they were full value for their victory, and to be honest, probably could have scored a couple more goals, and it wouldn't have been undeserved for them.
I think Eddie Howe's kind of got Arsenal's number to an extent, in the way that he sets Newcastle up to play. And it's not the first time he's done it against them. And he made it really difficult this time. It was a really physical encounter, and Newcastle love that. Arsenal really don't. And I feel like that's a weakness in Arsenal's game at the minute, is they don't have many physical characters and ones that would step up in the heat of battle. In fact, if anything, they seem to get a bit kind of annoyed by Newcastle's approach, which is, understandable. They're a difficult team to play against, and it was really frustrating to watch, I think, from an Arsenal fan's point of view. I'm sure they didn't enjoy seeing Newcastle make this game the way it was.
I think creativity-wise, I think they have been missing Martin Odegaard. I think he just gives them something a little bit different.
Definitely,
in between the lines, and just the transitions are so much smoother when he's in the team. I do think they have missed him. But
do you know what, though? That does make their summer business seem a little bit weird, though, because they've got Mikel Merino in there, and he's a good midfielder, but he's not really what they needed. And if you'd have said what kind of midfielder do they need, you wouldn't have said a Mikel Merino type midfielder. I feel like that was like an opportunity to sign a player that would be good depth for them, but not necessarily what was missing. And then Raheem Sterling as well. I'm a bit confused by this move. I feel like Arteta's not yet trusting him to do what he needs him to do. Like, how many times has he played Ethan Nwaneri as well instead of him, who's an amazing talent, let's not get me wrong. But yeah, it feels like Marino and Sterling are two players that don't seem to make Arsenal better. And I feel like Arteta feels that way too, don't you?
Yeah, I don't know if that's just been what's been available to him at the time. Obviously, there's been probably restraints there with finances, so they probably had to get some form of depth in there. But I agree, I think there are definitely a couple of positions in that squad where they need strength in terms of quality. He's strengthening in terms of quality, not just numbers, because the very best teams have got numerous brilliant players, 2 or 3 really good options in each position. And I think that's probably what Arsenal probably do lack a little bit if they're missing Declan Rice. We've seen it. They've not really got anything close to him. Martin Odegaard, I think, is exactly the same.
It's odd, isn't it, this Arsenal team? It felt like it was coming together so well, but I think a couple of absentees and you start to see that they've still got some gaps in the squad, which after the money they've spent must be a bit of a concern for Arteta. But yeah, Arsenal not making it easy this so-called title run. They slip out of the top 4. Dave, we talked about the top contenders for the title this season so far, and that was Arsenal and Man City, who both lost. Now, what about the teams that might take advantage of that in a potential title race? Amongst those in that conversation, it looks like it's Nottingham Forest, who climbed to 3rd, which is surreal, but not undeserved. And I got some stick on our channel from some Forest fans saying, why are you surprised that Forest are where they are? They're a club with so much history that it feels like there's a place for them, and that is at the top seat of English football. But I think after the couple of seasons they've had recently, this still feels like a surprise. And Forest fans have to agree with me here. They can't have seen a 3rd place position after 10 games, surely not. And they do say, Dave, don't they, that after 10 games is the first time to really look at the Premier League table and go, yeah, this might be how it might look at the end of the season. Do you think Forest fans are dreaming at the minute?
I don't think that. I can't see any reason why not, why they shouldn't. I can compare it, actually. It's similar to the Villa situation last year for me. If you look at what Villa have been through over the last couple of years.
Probably.
And I've seen comparisons made to the Leicester team, the title-winning team as well.
But I think the thing with Forest is that we keep wondering whether this is, above where we think they will be, but they keep doing things that keep making us realise they're actually better than we realise. And so many players have proved that in the first 10 games of the season. Obviously, Chris Wood, we mentioned last week, has suddenly become a really great finisher with the right players around him. And that's another thing. Their forward line, the midfielders, the attacking midfielders have all stepped up brilliantly. And obviously, the goals they scored in this game, albeit against 10 men of West Ham for the most part, were fantastic quality. They're a really good attacking team on the counter, aren't they? And this was proof of that again.
Oh, certainly. I mean, it's not going to be the last to see of their counter-attacking prowess. I think they've shown it throughout the season and through different players. We mentioned about the options that they have now, and Callum Hudson had always been absolutely superb for me this season. I think we're still waiting for Anthony Elanga to step up and show some of the promise that he did last season. I think he's had a little bit more of a slow start, but I think he'll get up and running. But yeah, I think just creativity-wise, they've got just so much there now, haven't they? And
yeah,
I think Hudson-Odoi, for me, he's the key man for them. I think it's just a breath of fresh air to watch him, and I think it's great actually considering the injury problems that he had, and I think showing the promise that he did at such a young age at Chelsea, and was linked with a massive move to Bayern Munich for 40 million, which seems ridiculous for the pennies that he did go for in the end to Forest. They're profiting massively from his re-emergence, should we say? And Chris Wood, he just keeps putting them away, doesn't he?
He does, but the service he's getting is brilliant, and this goal was not as spectacular as some of the goals he's scored lately, but he's in the right place at the right time with a critical header in a great position. So he's doing what you always want him to do, but I think now he's got those players around him. It's being made to look a lot easier.
I think if you look at a lot of his goals this season, you look at his positioning in the 6-yard box in the penalty area.
Yeah.
I think you've got to give a lot of credit to those coaching staff, because there's been a recurring theme with a lot of these goals, and I think some of the patterns and some of the team play that we've seen has been brilliant to watch. Between those the wingers, I think the likes of Hudson-Odoi and Elanga have been a real thorn in defence's sides, and I think they've creativity-wise have been superb.
I think you've got to look at the defence as well, especially at the fullback positions. I think Iraola as well with his goal was fantastic, and I don't know if you saw his interview at the end of the game where he was kind of joking about the finish, and he knew it was going to go in as soon as it left his boot and stuff like that. There's a good camaraderie amongst them, and he's one of those characters that I think's really come to the fore. Moreno as well on the other side, and those centre backs as well. We mentioned it last week, didn't we? Milenkovic and Murillo are just a different dimension for what we saw in the last season, where they were shipping so many poor goals from set pieces, from corners. Milenkovic has answered that problem brilliantly. They don't seem that brittle anymore because of his ability in the air, especially, and Murillo's ability on the ground. They seem like a defensive unit too, which has kind of enabled everybody in front of them to perform well. And I include the midfield in that. Like the injuries they've got in midfield are ridiculous, And stepping in has become Ryan Yates and Nico Dominguez. It was not the first choice pairing by any means, but throughout the pitch, they feel like a settled team now. And that's got to be, credit to Nuno Espirito Santo. I think he's doing a great job.
I think the key for me is the continuity. I think that's there. No matter what teams put out, they put performance in, and there's consistency, which is great for them. I mean, you look at you mentioned some of the defensive problems that they had last season. It seems that they've sorted those, which is superb for Forest fans. And I think the kind of coach that Nuno is, he's always looked to set up, with a solid structure, and something that some of his Wolverhampton teams is shown in the past, and they've built from there. And you look at that kind of that team that they've got there now. It's who's to say what their limitations are in this season now?
That's the question, isn't it? And I think Forest fans will stop themselves from dreaming too much, rightly, because they've not had the best recent years, have they? It's been coming good over the last couple of seasons, but it's been a rough spell between obviously the Premier League in recent years, but the majority of that time's been spent in the Championship. So they're probably negative mindset straight away, and understandably so. But the performances they're putting in, and some of the players that doing those performances for them. There's reason to be optimistic. On the other side of the coin is West Ham, though, Dave. They are so inconsistent with their lineup, with their results. I think genuinely, Julian Lopetegui is under pressure now, and I didn't think that was the case. But fans are getting really restless because obviously Edson Alvarez's second yellow for a stupid challenge so early in the game was a ridiculous thing to do. But they're the opposite of what Forest are doing at the minute, aren't they? They're just so unsettled. I don't know what team they're going to put out from one week to the next. And I don't think the players do either. So a lot of, I guess, discontent across the whole place now, which is odd. We had West Ham down as somebody, as a team that was one to watch.
I know Miles did, didn't he? Mentioned about them, really kind of making strides this season. And to be honest, there's been some shocking results and some shocking performances. Like, you look at the number of goals that they've been conceding. I think they're one of the worst defensive teams in the league. So where they go from here is another thing. And you kind of got to feel a little bit for West Ham fans because it felt like it was the time for them to be, making steps, especially with some of the players they've brought in, particularly over the last couple of years. And defensively, they were just all over the place again in this game, which Forest took full advantage of.
Yeah, ruthless.
They just look so open. That's the worrying thing for me. And this is this is a team that has some really talented defenders. Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who's probably one of the best defenders in the world in terms of 1v1 situations, and I just think it's looking worrying for me. And where do they go? How does he fix it? That's the question.
I don't know if it's something they can answer immediately because their run of games looks really difficult. They've got Everton on Saturday, which is a massive game all of a sudden, and then they could follow that with away at Newcastle and at home against Arsenal. So it doesn't get any easier for West Ham.
The problem for them is, and I think it's too early to say. I think they will be absolutely fine, but teams at the bottom are picking results or are picking points up. You look at Southampton, Ipswich, and Leicester are picking the odd point up every other week, and it's, can you keep going like this? We've spoken about it with Wolves, haven't we, over the last few weeks, and Gary O'Neill. How long do you leave it until inevitably the trigger's pulled? That's the thing.
Well, I'm sure West Ham fans will do the talking in the stands, to be fair, but I mean, do you think that West Ham fans would object to David Moyes coming back at this rate? Do you think they'd look at the way they're playing and go, we long for the David Moyes era? Because, I mean, it was easy to get negative at the time because they weren't doing as much as they felt the potential the team could do. But that's kind of being undone quite a lot right now, isn't it? Is Moyes someone you can see returning anytime soon for a sensational comeback?
I don't think so. I think that's ran its course, and deservedly so. Like, he had a great time at the club, and it was sad actually how it ended, to be honest, because there were a lot of fans, I think, calling for him to go, and I think he probably stayed a season too long, to be honest. It would have been perfect for him to end the way it did, obviously on the back of a European competition victory, and I just think it wouldn't be fair. I don't think it'd be fair on the club, and it wouldn't be fair on David Moyes for certain, and it's just, that's not progression, is it? That's taking a backward step. And where do they stand? Where does the club stand if they're making that move? I can't see it happening.
It'd just be spitballing ideas, to be fair, because I'm sure David Moyes would be sitting there with a bit of a smile on his face because the West Ham fans wanted a different way of playing. They've got that, and not in a good way. We'll see how it plays out. It'll be interesting, won't it? Yeah, that's really changed the shape of the top four, obviously, with Forest being in there. But another couple of teams as well that have always been in contention in the last couple of years is Villa and Tottenham. Always fascinating when these two teams play against each other. It feels like they rarely draw as well. It's always one team or the other that wins. In this game, Tottenham won 4-1 against Aston Villa, which surprised me for the most part, because if you watch the game, up to about an hour, maybe 65 odd minutes, it felt like a really dull game that was kind of bereft of a bit of quality and a bit of spark. Mm-hmm. And out of nowhere, Spurs just turned it on. And to their credit, they were persisting in trying to sort of defeat this Villa high line in this press. But once they found a way around that defence, it looked really easy for them. And I think Dominic Solanke was a real beneficiary of that with his goals. one of them an absolute peach. But yeah, this was probably, in my opinion, Tottenham's most, I don't know, clinical and Ange Ball best performance I've seen, that 20 minutes since he's been in charge.
Yeah, I don't think it was helped by a couple of. I think there were a couple of issues with that Villa setup. I think they targeted that right hand side of the Villa defence. Like you looked at where the goals came from, a lot of the moves and a lot of where they created opportunities was down that Villa right hand side, and Son was a real nuisance all the game, and I think we've seen that little bit of clip where he was really annoyed to come off and be substituted. And I think rightfully so. He looks like the Son of old and really caused them issues. And I think they found space in behind that Villa midfield. And it was quite surprising to see because, Villa this season and obviously over the last season have had this really solid setup in between midfield and defence where teams have actually struggled to take advantage of, and obviously play that really high line where teams actually struggle to get in behind them because they play that offside trap so well. But the likes of Kulusevski, we've spoken about him a few weeks ago, didn't we? It just links up space so well and was causing those issues in those pockets. I think I think you're right, Mike. I think you've got to give Postecoglou a bit of credit. I think they've had 2 brilliant results, this week, and they've really taken that momentum from the City game into this game. And some of the moves that we saw in this game were brilliant. And talk about the Solanke goal. It's a great bit of play.
Beautiful finish.
We took Kulusevski, that cute sort of disguised pass in behind, and doesn't even take a touch. First time finish is brilliant and fully deserved. Really, at the end of the day, I think Villa would be really disappointed though, considering the start.
Definitely, I think for Spurs as well. I think a lot of people have pointed to where they are this season compared to the start they had last season, and I think 10 points adrift. But they were top this time last year. I think they were unbeaten. Maybe I think they'd won 8 and drawn 2, something like that. Which was a false position really for them, wasn't it? It was just kind of a new manager bounce to an extent. But to see that drop off after that made it feel like it was a worse season than it actually was. I actually think the way they're performing this season, kind of slowly bubbling up to form, and they've been a bit inconsistent up to now, but I think this week has been a bit of a turning point for them. Like you say, a victory in the Cup, and then this game against a top 4 rival is huge. And I think Ange Postecoglou is always really kind of bullish about where he thinks the team's at. And I think he's always been, I hate to use the phrase, trust the process and sound like Eric Ten Hag all of a sudden, but he's been kind of like, have a bit of faith in us. I always kind of know what I'm doing in the second season. And although they are 10 points adrift from where they were this time last year, I think they're a better team and a better squad overall, don't you?
I think so. And I think they've had some, they've had injury problems throughout the season, which I don't think has helped them in terms of stability. But I think, they're getting to, I think if you look at particularly the last few weeks, I think with Spurs, there's always a few moments in the season when they have a couple of results which make you think, what's going on here. Like you look at obviously the United game, absolutely tore them to shreds, and then the following week they were 2-0 up against Brighton and then just capitulated. They have these results which just make you think, what's happened there? It's a real strange one. I think it's about not having less of those kind of results, but looking to kind of maintain some sort of consistency, which I think, Postecoglou is, he's mentioned time and again, is that they lose their focus a little bit too easily, I think, during games and let results slide.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, I think in this game, looking at how clinical they were is, such a positive for me. And I think to see Solanke get those couple of goals because he has struggled at times this season, but I think that will get him, given that all-important confidence going forward.
Oh, God, yeah. He's a confident striker, and I think it took him a while to click in the top level, and for Bournemouth as well. Like, it wasn't until last season, really, that we saw him showing the kind of prolific scoring that we thought he would be like when he was a youth player. But it's coming together quite quickly for Spurs so far. He's the right player in the right team in the right system, and it seems to benefit him really well. And good luck to him. I think it's the kind of opportunity he has now to kind of make more appearances in the England squad too, because he's definitely one of England's most natural finishers. He just needs to have the stats to back that up. So, yeah, Spurs, good for their win, I think, but it didn't look like it for the majority of the game because Villa was still in it up to a certain point. I thought Amadou Onana had his best game in a Villa shirt so far, and he's had some good performances. So I think Villa were unlucky, but it feels like these two teams, when they come together, it takes something small for the momentum to just shift, and then that's it. There's such small margins between them at their best. But yeah, Villa just weren't at it today, this weekend, were they?
Yeah, and I think this is a dilemma there still with. I think there's going to be a problem with the Duran-Watkins situation because I'm unsure whether they can actually play together in a system for Emre that he's happy with. I just think the balance is slightly out when those two are on the pitch together. And it's about how you fix that, I suppose. And is there a future Villa team there that has both of those in the same team? I don't think so. But I think if you ask a lot of Villa fans, and if you take these 10 games out of the equation, they would have been more than happy to get rid of John Duran before the start of the season, before his hot streak. And I just think for the balance of that Villa team, if it was me, I would rather keep Ollie Watkins than John Duran. Despite the ages of the two, probably opposite ends of their career. Ollie Watkins is 27 now. I think Duran's, he's only 20. He looks 27, but he's only 20. And it's whether you want to keep a player that's, he's got his career ahead of him, but then you've got a player like in Watkins who's, in the prime of his career. He's a real team player. He will, run tirelessly for that team defensively, and obviously going forward, we know what he can offer. So it's a bit of a head scratcher for me, and I think it will come to a point where Villa have to make a decision.
Well, but I think Watkins is by far the better player, and I think Emery knows that, and I think fans know that. Duran is such a talent, though. It's just whether he feels Duran, that is, whether he's got the patience to wait for his chance and to be a bit part player. And I think it's no coincidence in some ways that when Duran came on, 5 minutes later, Spurs, broke the duck and made it 2-1. So. Yeah, it is an odd one, isn't it, for Villa? But I mean, they're doing okay. I mean, they're what, 6th now, but they're level on points with Arsenal and Chelsea above them. So
I'm not saying there's not minutes there for it, but I think there's going to a point. He seems like the type of character who want to be the main man in attack and wants to be the guy. And I just feel like he can't be that guy at Villa at the moment. He's going to have to play a bit part role and rotate, I think, between him and Watkins. I just don't think he'll probably be happy with that kind of role. I think he probably feels like he needs to be playing regular first team football.
Well, we'll see. He's going to have a lot of opportunities and a lot of minutes in a lot of competitions, isn't he, to get his chance? And so far, he's taken it. I don't think Villa fans need to be too worried. It feels like this is one of those games that could have gone either way, and it did. It went the way of Tottenham on this occasion. But yeah, it changes the shape of the top four, doesn't it? And another game that did, albeit slightly this weekend, and we'll finish the pod on this, is Man United 1, Chelsea 1, Dave. Because Chelsea have actually snuck into the top four now after that draw because of results going in their favour. But it was an interesting game at Old Trafford, wasn't it? It was interesting to see Ruud van Nistelrooy again in the dugout for a United fan. But let's focus on Chelsea first. I don't think they quite knew how to deal with this rejuvenated United, did they, in some ways? And that moment of magic from Caicedo, who played brilliantly again, kind of equalised for them, and deservedly so. I felt like a draw was fair, but Chelsea look good when they're great, don't they?
They do, and strangely enough, their more dangerous players were kept quiet for the large part of the game. Kyle Palmer was quite quiet at times during the game, and I think they struggled to speed the game up when they wanted to. I think United dealt with them really well and defended. Actually, defensively, it was probably one of the best games. So it was so typical that they just score a wonder goal like that out of nowhere. But yeah, obviously they're in a great place at the minute. Chelsea, they are obviously going forward and progressing. I think if you look at where they were last season, nobody knew what they were. But I just think at least now there is. I think he's getting an idea of what his best team is, Maresca.
Yeah, definitely.
And he's filtering through those players now, and he's looking at who are the guys, the go-to guys for him. But so much of their attacking play does revolve around Cole Palmer, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it seems like if he's not on
Hmm.
it, I think they do struggle a little bit to create.
Yeah, I
You
think
saw
that
that.
was
You saw that in this game, and United had the better
100%.
chances. That's the thing. Like they had, a lot more chances than what Chelsea had, and created a
Yeah.
lot more. It's just this is a tale of United's season, isn't it? And just struggling to score goals from open play.
Yeah.
Um, so
Neither team
yeah,
very clinical, really. I think they both had chances and, yeah, didn't really look quite the finished article in the final third. And I guess for Chelsea, they're further along in their development than United are. But a positive point for United, I think, nonetheless. I think if Eric Ten Hag was still in charge, we'd have approached this game with a lot more negativity and caution. And you could feel it inside the stadium, couldn't you, that the fans were a lot more buoyant this time around. And I guess the news of a new coach coming in, especially a new young up and coming coach like Ruben Amorim, will have that effect. But I also think Ruud van Nistelrooy deserves some credit as well. I think you can tell his instructions to the players were quite clear. Go out and try and score and enjoy it, and it looked like they were enjoying it for the first time in a while.
yeah, and it's nice to hear. I think what he comes out and says. I think particularly after his first game against Leicester, he obviously came out and said, that he explained to the players what it meant to be, a United player, and spoke about some of the songs that are sang about some of the players and the meaning behind those, and how the stories around that began. I just think it definitely helps, and the mood, and I think the morale in and around the squad to have him, in charge at least for the time being. And I just hope he stays in and around the coaching staff, because it seems like for me, like we do need some of those former players, the ones who are obviously up to standard in and
Yeah.
around they've got the know-how of the team and the club. But it's just going to be interesting now, isn't it, when Amorim comes in and what kind of approach he takes, I suppose. And
Well, I think that's the thing. He's not going to have a huge amount of transfer funds for a while because we've spent so much money. So he's going to have to try and coach and find the roles for these players that suits his preferred formation, which at the minute looks like it's going to be a back three. He's stuck with that since his early coaching days. How he makes that work, I don't know, but I'm really curious to see. It feels like for the first time, there's a bit of reason to be excited as a United fan, despite the fact we're sitting at 13th place in the Premier League. It feels like the only way is up all of a sudden, doesn't it?
yeah, and I mean the formations is the fascinating thing, isn't it? Really, we're not renowned for playing a back five or a back three with wing backs. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I think his impact that he has on our attacking side of our game is going to be the key, really, because we've just not been able to piece that together for the last 18 months. Even our goal difference last season was pathetic. So
It is so far this season, isn't it? We need to get more clinical. That's the thing. And I think we're creating chances more in the last couple of games than I've seen in ages. And I think it needs a big win. I think a really statement win in the Europa League game in midweek against PAOK, isn't it? And see how we get on against them to really kind of have a bit of confidence in front of goal, because we're lacking that at the moment. But yeah, the only way is up. I hope we'll have some more positive takes on United going forward, I think, from here on in. But Amorim takes charge on the 11th of November officially. He seems really excited to be in the job as well, which is great to see. And a bit of positivity around the club is just what we need. And it's an interesting week, isn't it, to look ahead to the next pod. Hopefully you'll stick around for that one. That's the end of this week. But yeah, we've got obviously European games to reflect on next time we talk. A couple of massive games in the Premier League title race as well. I think, is it Chelsea playing against Arsenal, from what I remember, which is huge. Liverpool playing Aston Villa as well. So yeah, the title race, the top four, the top six, whatever you want to call it, looks interesting, doesn't it? How are you feeling about the week ahead, mate?
Yeah, I'm quite excited, to be honest. I think ever since, like, as a United fan, I think since this change has been made, I think it's always interesting to see how the players react. And I think it's just this new air of positivity about the place, especially when a new coach is announced, and there's so much of an aura around him as well. You've got to be excited, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, Miles can't join us for this pod, but I'm sure if Villa win against Club Brugge in midweek and they're still top of the Champions League, he'll have something to say.
Always the case. Whenever Villa have a bad result, he's just never here, is he? No, he
He,
needs to sort
he
himself
accuses
out.
us of that, mate. But how many times have United had bad results and we still show up every other week? It feels like. But yeah, hopefully we'll see Miles's reaction.
There'd be no pod otherwise, would there? Let's be honest.
No, that's true. Yeah, it's been a rough couple of years, hasn't it? Thanks again for joining us. It's been great to have you all, and it'd be great to see more sort of likes, subscribes, interactions on YouTube and all of our social channels as well at Football Diary UK. It's great to hear from football fans when the going's well for your club, and even when it's not. It's nice to see your take on how it goes. And if you disagree with us, that's cool. That's what football's all about at the end of the day, isn't it? It's all a bit of friendly debate. But yeah, please do join us next week. Dave, thanks for your time, mate. I'll speak to you then.
Pleasure. See you again.
See you later.